Are there any ladies here who are interested at all in fashions this morning? See, with the Shriners in town, how many Shriners are there? 110,000, I think, yeah. Other conventions are kind of likely to get lost. It's possible. There is, for example, the 21st semi-annual press week of the Couture Group of the New York Dress Institute in town. What that means to me is that a lady we know from the New York Herald Tribune, Miss Eugenia Shepard, who is a famous fashion expert and who is leaving in a matter of hours or days for Paris and Rome, has brought over a few of the heaviest wow, and most charming-looking new fashions that I have seen for a while and promised to tell us a thing or two about them. So, Eugenia, why don't you go ahead? This is what the girls are going to be wearing this fall?
This fall, yes. Are you interested in fashions, or am I just talking to a stone wall here?
Not a stone wall. I'll go along.
Well, I tell you, I'll explain to you very simply that the new fall fashions are going to be both natural and elegant. And by natural, I mean that they're going to follow the contours of a woman's figure. And by elegant, I mean that the fabrics are going to be especially elegant. Now, I wish we had a real girl here to show you, but perhaps I can point out better here how this dress follows the body lines through here and down here. And you see, nothing happens too much. I mean, nothing sticks out too much here, nothing sticks out too much here. That's what I mean by the natural look. Do you like it?
Is that the same as kind of simple?
Simple, natural, but natural following the lines.
I'll tell you for 99% of the men that they like it. They like simple things and ungimmicky.
Now we're getting into the cocktail department. And necklines are pretty exciting. You know they always are. They're never square necklines this fall. They're all cut across this way, scooped out like a boat, or a plunging neckline, which you're going to see in a minute. Incidentally, this is white mink, which is popular as a trimming.
I can just barely stand to say this, Eugenia, but we're not going to have time for the plunging neckline.
Oh, I'm sorry that you'll miss the plunging neckline.
Next fall, perhaps. And so we'll thank Eugenia Shepard for coming in and telling you ladies about the new fall fashions and us fellows about who's going to wear them. And we'll see you tomorrow at the same old stomping ground, with or without 70-piece orchestras. And thank you very much for putting your head this close today. And of course...
Mr. Warhol, I've said what you probably think are an awful lot of pompous things about your work and what it means in the 20th century and everything. Do you agree with any of it?
Can I just answer?
Yes, you can. I mean, do you ever bother to read all these great interpretations that are put on it?
Well, newspaper writing is my favorite writing, but now I watch two televisions at one time, and so I just love to watch television, so I don't read anymore.
Back in 1962, or 61 or 62, around in then, when you and Rosenquist and Lichtenstein all were working very independently of each other, but evolving a same kind of attitude. Does that seem odd to you, that you all began to look at the world in the same way?
I think we just read a lot of comic books, and it just happened to come out then.
Well,
because comic books make things the way they are really today. I mean, the way things happen in New York now, it's like being in a Western movie. I mean, it's just so scary. Newspapers are more like the comic books then. I mean, you pick up a newspaper now, it's just like a comic book of, 8 years ago. It's really strange.
With all
There's so much action, yeah. Well, this action, I guess, it's happening.
Why are you going to change your name to John Doe?
After I thought about it now is, if I told everybody what my name was, then that's sort of silly, so I think I'm going to take another name.
I mean, you're not going to take John Doe?
Well, I'm not sure. I was working on it and stuff, but then I thought it would be easier to just take some other name and just work under that.
Why?
Because if they knew it was John. Well, John Doe is my favorite name. And if they know what it is, then they know that it's really me. But I think it's better actually to take a whole new name that somebody doesn't know. And actually the name was spelled wrong. It's D-O-U-G-H.
Why do you want to be anonymous?
Well, I think you can just do more.
Do you don't think people will recognize what you do, even if it's under another name?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think your style is like a signature?
No, because there's so many different things and new things to know about.
When you first started painting, people said this was so very American, but it's sort of universal now, isn't it?
Well, I think everything's becoming sort of English or American or something like that all over the world.
I mean, England, America's sort of
Yeah.
setting the tone.
Yeah.
If you were I and were interviewing yourself, what would you ask?
That the lights go out.
Mailer stated repeatedly his admiration for Miller, but he was not blinded, he said, to Miller's faults.
No, I said that he's a great writer, and when he's not writing well, he's the worst.
He can be the worst.
The worst great writer ever to be a great writer.
Well, people have always have said this about you, too, and the literary...
Yeah, but they're wrong in my case, because one, I'm not a great writer, and two, I never write that badly.
What do you mean you never write that badly?
Picasso was a marvelous remark. Someone came up to him once and said, well, it's not a, it's a bad Picasso, and he said, there are no bad Picassos. Some Picassos are better than other Picassos, but there are no bad Picassos.
That sounds like him to say it.
Yeah, I believe he said it.
Yeah, oh yes,
And he was wrong.
Mailer and Miller disagreed on the virtues and faults of Miller's book about the Greece he loved, The Colossus of Marusi.
I made that switch over, as you think of it, to the Colossus. That maybe something you didn't like was the simplicity of the style. I think I began to become more simple in my style, and that's my goal, to become even more idiotic, if you like it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't agree with you. I couldn't understand the Colossus of Marusi.
You couldn't, huh?
No, I mean, you'd have sentences and I'd read them and I'd say, I don't know what he's saying.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Now,
I understood every sentence in Tropic of Cancer.
yes, of course. Yes, I can believe that.
But after all, that had a lot about sewers and rainbows and sewers. And,
Yeah, yeah.
And the Colossus of Marusi had a lot about rainbows.
No, I know. That's a strange thing, because this is the work that I like the most of everything. I want to be remembered by that book rather than any of the others.
I know. I knew that I'd offended you when I visited.
Well, you didn't. I
last time.
thought you just made a bad error. That was all.
Well,
Mailer and Miller disagreed again on the value of another of Miller's books, The Devil in Paradise.
the fundamental philosophical notion in your work all through until The Devil in Paradise is that the act of giving takes care of itself. In other words, I've always been saying over and over again, give without stint and take without stint. And what's wrong with the entire world is everybody measures what they give and they're nervous about taking. And you said, no, I take what I want and I give everything I've got. Then you run into the astrologer, Morricone. And it's a philosophical novel, a short novel, a gem. Because you, this eternal optimist, I mean, this what can I say, this ecstatic optimist runs into a pessimist who's made of such a dark metal that he defeats you. And it's one of the gloomiest, and at the same time, one of the most penetrating works of philosophy I've ever read. It's in the novel that your philosophy expresses itself.
You're making it a greater work than I thought it was.
That's what the critic is for.
Mailer and Miller spoke, of course, of many writers, and finally set upon one who lives now in New York as a man the two authors from Brooklyn both admire.
There's one writer I think is a great writer. I put him either alongside myself or bigger than me. Isaac Bashevis Singer.
Oh, fantastic writer. Yes,
isn't he?
Marvelous writer. I wouldn't compare the two of you. He's altogether different from you.
I know he is.
But,
I know he is.
He's a wonderful writer.
Yes, yes. And what gets me is
he loves you too.
He does. I know. I met him. He has to be translated from Yiddish. Think of it. One of our best writers is a man who's translated. Don't you know?
He stays close to the translations.
Yes, I know that. He knows more English than he pretends.
Yeah.
I found that out, yes.
On Lower Broadway in New York, there is a unique bookstore called Strand. It has stacks and stacks and shelves and tables and bins piled with used books. A lot of books. In fact, more than 1 million books. And down in the basement, stacked floor to ceiling with stacks of books, you will find Bert Britton. I think Bert is a literary mole, burrowing with books beneath the ground. And when famous writers drop into Strand to find a book long out of print, Bert grabs them and asks them to sign his notebook and to draw a self-portrait. Well, over the years, these notebooks have grown and grown. They are startling or funny and always revealing. And one day, Bert said, I bet a lot of people would like to see these very famous people and how they see themselves. And so he put everything in a book. He has taken his own notebooks and turned them into a book. It is called Self-Portrait. Book people picture themselves. Now, Saul Bellow just recently won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Where did you meet Saul Bellow?
he comes into the Strand whenever he's in New York. He lives in Chicago. I kind of lucked out because nobody really knew that Saul Bellow would win the Nobel Prize, so what's marvelous is having a Nobel Prize winner on the first page of the book. It's kind of very elegant, isn't it?
It is elegant. Do you think that is a good profile of Saul Bellow?
Yeah, I think it has his kind of cleanness, that kind of sensitivity he has. He's a very soft, he's a very defined man. He's kind of soft, and most people think he's very handsome, very good looking, but I think it catches him. There's a...
Right there. Now, everybody knows. No, everybody knows that Woody Allen's character is very introverted and shy. And I said these drawings were revealing. In the book is a self-portrait by Woody Allen, of Woody Allen, and it is certainly not big.
Well, I think that's the most important thing, is the size. I certainly don't want to analyze these, but I think this is a very good one in the sense that all that white space, and there's Woody, you know, just this tiny dot on the... keep in mind, I never ask people to draw a self-portrait for me. I ask for a self-portrait. And most people do pick up a pencil or a pen and do that. But Joan Didion, for instance, did a thumbprint. Other people have done things like that.
Let's look at some of the big pictures that are behind us of three famous people who appear together in the book. I mean, they're grouped together. That first one is who?
That's Tennessee No-Neck Monster Williams.
So he wrote Tennessee No-Neck Monster Williams. Let's see what Arthur Miller drew of himself. What does that mean to you? Well, he's got a typewriter there to indicate instantly that he's a writer.
I don't know what it means. I love this one, but I must say more people seem to respond to this one than just about anybody in the book. People love this one.
This is Erica Jong, the poet and novelist. And she has a quote on the bottom that says, what does it say?
Terror writes poetry, hope, prose, which has gotten lots of comment, of course. And what it says above there is, just because I smile a lot doesn't mean I don't also weep, which is, I think, much more important.
Here, just very quickly, here is Zero Mostel, who is actually an artist. He has his own studio, and he paints. Here is William Saroyan, who writes with such clarity and such simplicity, almost childlike writing. And look at this crazy maze of a drawing.
You write about the Washington days. When Washington comes up, it's with words like, when I derailed in Washington. Do you associate Washington with a bad time in your life?
Well, a very lonely time, because I'd always been active, well, since I was 9 years old. And I was very active in the campaigning, where I really started eating because of the odd hours, and you really sort of eat on the run, and you eat standing up or in a car, and you eat Colonel Sanders and all those, you know, all the junk food in the world. And you don't have time to think about correct eating or proper food, or there is no such thing as dinner time. Breakfast time could be 6:30 in the morning or 4:30 or 8 o'clock. It was an unbelievable schedule. And from that kind of activity, and feeling that I was doing something to help my husband, to becoming totally redundant and not knowing anyone in Washington, I went through a kind of phase where I really didn't know who I was, what purpose I was serving as a human being.
You write about how after John Warner was elected to the U.S. Senate, he would say, well, I've got quite a lot of work here to do. Why don't you go upstairs and watch a little TV, Pooters?
Yeah.
Pooters? Pooters.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine Elizabeth Taylor being told by a man that I've got some work to do, honey, go upstairs and watch TV.
Yes, oh, I did. I'm a very committed wife. I should be committed, too, for being married so many times. But I keep trying, or kept trying. I may have given up now. But I always gave 100%. And I realized that he was giving 100% of himself to the Senate. He married the Senate. I was married to him. I'm not blaming Washington or John or anyone. It's totally my fault, my responsibility. I could have, I'm sure, made more of an effort and gotten out and done more to regain my sense of identity. But instead, I just allowed myself to submerge. And I wallowed in it toward the end. I mean, it was, with the booze and the pills and the food, it was all cross-addictive. And I was slowly sort of letting myself die.
Anita Hill's testimony that Clarence Thomas sexually harassed her shocked the entire nation. Of course, Thomas was eventually confirmed as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. But when the hearings were over 2 years ago, left unanswered was the crucial question of who was telling the truth. Author David Brock believes he has found the answer. He claims to have found discrepancies in Anita Hill's testimony and has documented them in his book, The Real Anita Hill, Untold Story. Professor Charles Ogletree was lead counsel to Anita Hill during the Thomas confirmation hearings. He joins us as well. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you. Mr. Brock, let me start with you. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, you know, at the time of the hearings, I believed Anita Hill. I watched Clarence Thomas. I believed Clarence Thomas. And I accepted the media image that these were two people of equal credibility. And as I got into reporting a story for the American Spectator on the subject, I found a number of discrepancies in Professor Hill's testimony, problems with her corroborating witnesses, things that questioned her credibility as a witness. So what I did was, for the book, was to compare the sworn testimony of Clarence Thomas with third-party testimony, with documents, with records. When I did that, I found no problems. When I did that with Professor Hill's testimony, I found problems. I found false statements, incorrect statements, and I think the accumulation of all of that settles the question of credibility, hands down, in favor of Clarence
We're going to
Thomas.
get to all those points, or at least some of them that you raise in the book in just a moment, but I just want to ask Professor Ogletree, you've read the book. What are your impressions of it?
Well, the problem is that it's a great investigative effort, but he's careless with the truth. It's a great piece of fiction, but he doesn't deal with fact. He makes countless errors of fact. He tells outright lies. He refers to statements that have been proven false. And it's a dupe. I think that the most important thing is that journalists should take a look at David Brock's book and find out about the real David Brock, not the real Anita Hill. The untold story is that he's relied on lies, on distortion, on misrepresentations, on inaccuracies, and has put them in a book. Many of those were pointed out in an article he wrote last year in the American Spectator. He was aware of that. He retracted many of those lies. He's done it again in the book in even larger form. And if people look at this book objectively, they'll say, here it goes again. It's not surprising from David Brock. It's not surprising from the American Spectator. It's not surprising that someone would try to retaliate against Professor Hill. She was a victim of sexual harassment. There's never been any question about that. She's never changed what happened to her. It was confirmed by the polygraph test, and David Brock's book is a crock.
And if I was single and you were single and we hooked up as a couple, can you imagine what that, would you imagine the headlines? Howard Stern fouls Katie Couric, ruins her. The demon has, you know,
Sullies
and the
her.
birth.
Okay, let's talk about
Go ahead.
Miss America.
Yes.
Why the title, and how long have you been into cross-dressing, Howard?
Why Miss America? When I was a kid growing up, in high school, I would come down the steps. My parents were disgusted by me. I had started this growth spurt. I looked like a big, hairy pencil. I'm walking down the steps, and my father would look at me, and I'd be in my underpants, and he looked at his son, who was sprouting facial hair, and he'd go, oh, look, there's Miss America.
How long did your parents try desperately to work on you, Howard, and when did they just throw their hands up and say, this is not exactly a boy who's going to grow up and be a doctor?
Well, my father was always very disappointed in me. My father was the type of guy who wanted me to be a lawyer. He wanted me to go into politics. He felt that I would be a great politician, and I was always a disappointment to him, because all I ever wanted to be since the age of 5 was a disc jockey. And I had this grand plan to go on radio and change the face of radio, to make it completely different. I had the idea for this show when I was 5 years old.
Come on.
I swear to you. And my father would say to me, you are horrible. You don't have a voice, you do not have a delivery, you don't read the newspaper, you don't study any books, you have to be well-versed to be in radio. You have nothing going for you. This is a ridiculous career choice. And yet I defied him and I went into radio. And I proved that he was wrong. And that has been the whole basis of my life.
What kind of woman is married to Howard Stern?
Actually, my wife is probably the most supportive individual on the planet. I'm madly in love with her. And I think she's madly in love with me, although she hasn't given me sex in 2.5 weeks, so I don't know.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, well, you should know that.
Is anything at all off limits to you?
Absolutely not. I would talk
Nothing.
about anything.
I was mentioned
As
in the
witnessed
book.
by talking about how attractive I think you are.
I was
By the way, the whole interview, I'm looking at your legs. Fabulous.
Let's talk about what you're going to do next. Are you going to be doing this show and radio for as long as you can, or do you, I know that you talked about doing a movie, and is there a movie of private parts in the
There's a
works?
movie of private parts. The script is completed.
So are you going to stop doing the radio gig and become a full-time actor?
No,
or?
I still have a lot to accomplish in radio. There's a lot of people who have never heard a guy pass wind into a microphone yet, and
Oh,
they
gosh.
need to
Can
hear
you
that.
imagine?
Do you realize there's somebody in Minnesota right now has never heard a guy pass wind into a microphone?
Oh, gosh.
To actually take his buttocks and put it up to the microphone and pass wind. No
So
one.
deprived.
I feel that that's something I have to do. You know, I have still that desire to make sure they hear it.
David Brock, good morning.
Good morning.
Tough situation in an interview here, and you're ready for this question, but you're someone who admits you lied. Right? You did a lot of things that simply weren't true. You wrote things that weren't true. You were posing as a journalist when you were really a political operative, and now you come and sit with me and look at our viewers and say, here's the truth. And the question is, why should they believe this version of the truth?
Well, let me tell you exactly the history of this. This is not an overnight process. This has been a 6-year process. I lied once in print in the American Spectator a couple years after I wrote my Anita Hill book. I believe the Anita Hill book was true when I did it. Found out later some damaging information about Clarence Thomas, and I continued to cover it up. And that was when I really hit rock bottom.
But you've said you were not even a journalist. You were really basically a political
Sure.
operative masquerading as a journalist.
Right.
Are you a journalist now?
No, this book is a memoir. This is not a journalistic exercise. This is what I did and what I saw conservatives say and do during this entire decade of really an inside story of a dirty tricks operation that the Republicans ran. So it's really a first-hand account.
Let me go back to 1991, though, and Clarence Thomas, okay?
Sure.
During his confirmation hearings, we all remember at the 11th hour, here came Anita Hill. And she said, you know what? Clarence Thomas harassed me over the years. Did you properly investigate her side of the story, or did you only talk to Clarence Thomas's supporters?
I talked to Clarence Thomas's supporters, and that book is really crafted based on their view of what happened, their subjective interpretations of Anita Hill, and so there was a built-in bias. Now, did I make the phone calls to contact Anita Hill and her supporters? I did, but I was working for a conservative magazine. Most of those calls weren't returned, and frankly, if they were, you know, I had a mission. There was a check written to that magazine to go after Anita Hill. It was checkbook journalism, and I was doing that kind of job, and you know, I'm certainly not proud of it.
You wrote that line that stuck with you for a long time, and stuck with her. You called her a little bit nutty and a little bit slutty. Coming from someone who's posing as a journalist, that can be incredibly damning to someone's character.
Sure. I mean, in some ways it was, and that line has stuck with me, but if you look at the other side of it, Rush Limbaugh read that article on the air, and that really made my name on the right, which tells you something about what they value.
After the Monica Lewinsky story broke and Mrs. Clinton was on this program and she talked about the now famous vast right-wing conspiracy, you were watching that day. Were you a part of that right-wing conspiracy?
I was, and I was stunned when she said it because I said, finally somebody gets it. And I think maybe she and I were the only ones who got it that day because a lot of people laughed off what she said. But this book really documents, Matt, and I think that's the historical value of it, that you can't really judge the Clinton presidency without a documentation of the implacable opposition he faced. There are millions of dollars spent, and I name names, and I show you how all that worked. Well, mainly someone named Richard Mellon Scaife put more than $2 million into a dirt digging operation on the Clintons. And then the conspiracy came to center on the Paul Jones case and the secret conservative advisors around that case. So, I mean, it really is clearly documented that there was a conspiracy. The only thing I quibble with is the word vast. There weren't that many people involved, and it's kind of scary that so few people with a lot of money could abuse our political process the way they did and try to disable and destroy our system.
You're not a simple man, Groucho. No. Pat started to ask him a question. I said, whatever it is.
Which one is Pat of you three?
Huh? On the left.
On the left? Oh.
And I said, save it till
Pat,
we're on
you're
the air,
charming.
because we
You
don't
got
Thank you.
beautiful
what do you want?
teeth.
Now ask him your question, Pat.
I kind of wish I hadn't even brought it up.
Well.
Groucho, how did you get that funny, kooky walk of yours, she said?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll show you my walk if you show me your wiggle.
It's a setup thing. I don't wiggle.
You don't?
I just...
Well, there's no point
sort
in
of walk.
walking if you don't wiggle. But I can tell you a story about that. You want to walk?
Not particularly. I'd much rather hear your story.
Yeah, what's the story?
I'd rather see you walk.
What'd you walk?
Well, go on.
Were you sure how you developed your
Well, I want to see his walk.
Okay,
It's
just
got to be fair. And I'll cheat. I'll walk straight out of camera range.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes. Nice pair of legs, too. Are those yours, Pat?
Can't help it. Look out for that microphone.
Did you walk already?
Yeah, I walked.
No, you're supposed to walk in front of me. Otherwise, I have no inspiration to walk.
How do we walk?
Just come over and stand in front of me and walk.
If you think I'm scared of this whole bit, you're absolutely right.
Why? I think you're the essence
A
of
man
dignity.
who describes himself as
Kiss
being
me, you
dignified
fool.
and writes memoirs of a mangy lover are worried.
Come on.
Now, what do we do?
Now walk right over there.
I walk. Oh, I wish I were dead or any place else or something.
That's a dirty trick. I
Now,
didn't know you
there, I
had any
asked the
track
question
there.
and I still don't know.
You only have so much.
You did a
room.
great job. But I want to tell you about Marilyn Monroe. When we did one picture in which she had a bit, she got $100 for one day's work. You can imagine how long ago this was. And Lester Cowan, who was producing the picture, he called me up because I was going to do the scene with Marilyn. He called me up and he said, we should come over to the studio tomorrow to my office because we're going to try out 3 girls for the part in this picture. I think it was called Love Happy or something. A terrible picture. So I sat there with Lester and the 3 girls were there. I was introduced to them. And he says, now the first girl, walk. And she walked across from one end to the other. He says, very nice. He says, now the second girl, walk. And she did it too. And then the third one. He says, now you walk across. And he says, well, which one do you like the best? I says, you're kidding, aren't you? Now, how can you take anybody except that last girl? Well, the whole room revolved when she walked. And it was Marilyn Monroe. And she got $100. And then we quit shooting at 5. And she got $25 extra for going to a couple of gas stations. They were plugging some kind of gas or something, which was part of the picture or something. And she got $25 extra for, they took snapshots of her from 6 to 8 o'clock. She was a wonderful girl, really. Very nice girl.
I had no idea she started with you, Groucho, and did her first part in a Marx Brothers picture.
That was her first picture. It was almost our last.
On Monday evening over NBC, Robert Montgomery presents, offers a drama entitled Soldier from the Wars Returning. And the star of that drama is one of America's great actors, James Cagney. Jimmy, Monday will be the first time you're performing in a live television show at all, isn't it? What made you take the step?
Well, no, not exactly the first time. I did a bit with Ed Sullivan, rather, on his show about 2 years ago to publicize Mr. Roberts.
I remember that.
About 2 minutes
speak of it, yeah.
piece or something like that.
Well, you've been rehearsing for several days now. How would you compare TV rehearsals with movie rehearsals?
Well, they're essentially the same. We've got a script to do. The difference is that there is a constant flow of movement, and the cameras, of course, you operate with 3 or 4, we operate with only 1. And the only thing is, the difference, essential difference, is that there is a strict continuity in this, whereas we do a straight hour. We will shoot a script in 5 or 6 weeks, and there's nothing that holds us to it.
Well, let me check some statistics here now. Who says, the Who's Who says you were 52 on your last birthday. You're 5'9", you weigh about 160, I would guess.
Yeah.
You have 2 children, a 16-year-old son named Jim and a 15-year-old daughter named Kathy.
That's
Is that
about right.
Correct?
That's about right, yeah.
Who's Who is still in business there.
Yeah, keep 'em there.
People, you know, who have never seen you work, young kids just growing up, still know you by the imitations that are done of you every place. Did you imitate an imitator imitating you?
Well, to me, it's a very, well, you know, imitation has been a part of show business ever since it started, of course. And I do remember when I was a kid, I used to go to the theaters and see imitators impersonate the people of show business, and it's still a part, and it's somebody's making a living from it. So what's better than that?
No, nothing that I know of. Of all the movie roles that you have played, which one gave you the most satisfaction?
Oh, I think Yankee Doodle Dandy. That was a very satisfying, because they had everything to work with, you know. It was all phases of show business, and they did it interestingly, I thought. It was a good job.
Did you know George M. Cohan yourself?
Met him only once, a long time back, and that was just for a fleeting 2 minutes, and that was the end of it. Never saw him.
In Love Me or Leave Me, you played Mo the Gimp, and you walked with a limp.
Yes.
In Yankee Doodle Dandy, you walked and danced like George M. Cohan with a little stoop. Does that character portrayal ever rub off on you some bit? Do you find yourself occasionally limping or bending over?
No, you use them as you need them and go on, let them go on their way.
Do you talk fast all the time or just when you're on camera?
No, this is, I guess, a natural trait. There's nothing I can do about that. It's hard for me to talk slowly.
Don't change it, no. You were born on the east side here in New York, weren't you?
That's right.
Which today is the scene, Jimmy, of much juvenile delinquency, as you know, and pretty rough at that. Was the east side rough when you were a kid living there?
Oh, yes. That seems to be part of the New York scheme. But I think there's always that. As a matter of fact, the neighborhoods that I grew up in are much better now than they were then. And for some other neighborhoods have deteriorated. But on the average, I suppose it's about the same.
I suppose. On the screen now, you're always a guy who's pretty handy with his dupes. Had you ever thought of becoming a prize fighter, seriously?
Oh, every kid in our neighborhood had some ideas. And one time, working after school and going to district when I was in high school, I was about 17, thought it'd be a very good idea to get some added pocket money. And I started a train to get about. And my mother caught me at it, told that I was looking rather peaked and worn. She said, "What are you trying to do?" I told her I could pick up some money and so on. And she said, "Can you lick me?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, you'll have to do that first."
You said some remarkable things about acting, and one of them I want to ask you about now. In your book, The Lonely Life, you quote an old French proverb that says, in effect, I'm paraphrasing it, that acting tends to make a woman more than a woman and a man less than a man. Now, can you explain that?
Well, I believe the French meant that. I think it's true. I think that any woman who is an actress is more than a woman. Number one, she's going out into a man's world, ply her trade. And I think as regards many men as actors, it is an odd profession for a man. It's an odd thing for a man to be made up, for instance. It's an odd thing for a man to have to sort of primp and see that his hair is right and that it doesn't go with being a man. And I think maybe some men have felt this way who have become actors, you know. There are no generalities. There are some actors who certainly can't say Mr. Tracy wasn't 100% man.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly can't say Mr. Claude Rains wasn't. In our present group, certainly Mr. Gable, certainly Mr. Cooper, and certainly among our present younger people, certainly Mr. Steve McQueen. But I find the actor a far vainer person than the actress, basically. If he goes into acting, he really goes into it.
Is that because vanity comes less naturally to him?
I don't know. I don't know really why, but I just know this is true.
I'm glad to hear you cite among the new actors that there are men in the group, because the charge has been leveled that there's a little less masculinity in today's crop of actors than there were in the...
Well, I think really it's not. You see, Hollywood reflects the world. I think there's a little less masculinity floating around all over the world, frankly. I don't think it just has to do with Hollywood. I think it's a puzzling time for the male, because the woman has gone so very far ahead and he's sort of keeping his own standards. So I don't think it's just that this is true of Hollywood. I think it's true of everywhere in our country today.
You know, in view of the fact that history has shown that it usually heralded the decline of a civilization, to have that gender confusion.
Yes.
It may bode ill for us if that is true, but I'm happy to hear you point out the fact that there are some...
Well, yes, I really just think if men would just sort of relax and admit that the woman is here to stay in another world of working or whatever, then I think it would all sort of take care of itself.
That has my vote.
This has been an extraordinary year for Meryl Streep. 3 years ago, few people even knew her name. Today, she is one of the world's most honored actresses. The past year, she has been in 3 big hit movies, all in one year, and acclaimed for all. The Seduction of Joe Tynan with Alan Alda, Manhattan with Woody Allen, and now Kramer versus Kramer with Dustin Hoffman. She won the New York Film Critics Prize. The other day, she won the Golden Globe Award, and she is sure to get an Oscar nomination. She is stunning to look at, invigorating to talk with, one of the most intelligent women, and when she comes through the door, her radiance sweeps through the room like wildflower. Not long ago, she walked into a New York screening room where we encountered each other and we sat for a chat about Kramer versus Kramer, and I asked her to talk about her role.
It's a woman who leaves And so right at the very beginning of the movie, I leave. And right after that, everybody tries to explain why. And it's kind of a mystery until at the end I come back.
Don't tell.
Oh, I won't. I come back and sort of explain myself. And by that time, there are a lot of assumptions made, which are or are not borne out by what I say and how I am, how I present myself.
People have often commented on the men with whom you have performed, both on stage and in film.
Yeah.
It's like a galaxy of the finest actors we have. And now Dustin Hoffman is your opposite number in this film. How is Hoffman to work with?
He's mad. He is totally out of his mind. He's great. He kind of keeps everybody clicking and on their toes.
Why? Because they don't know what he's going to do next?
Oh, they don't know what he's going to do. And but he's such a good craftsman and really loves his work. So he works real hard, but he also understands the element of fun and that nothing has to be, especially in the movie that, in Kramer, because it could be a horrible kind of experience, because it's about real, true gut emotions about love in a family and the family being torn apart. And it could be very heavy going, but Dustin injects his own peculiar sense of humor and his own life. He's quite a force. He's amazing.
Stephen, tell me about Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi has a gift of communication which I've never experienced before, directing actors and actresses in pictures. Whether the pictures had special effects in them or not, I've never experienced somebody who can communicate more with an expression, more at a glance, than through monologues or long moments of character explanation. Whoopi Goldberg doesn't need that. She is so communicative. And when I first saw her, she performed for me. She came to my office and she did 45 minutes of her act that she eventually brought to New York, about 9 months before she ever brought it to New York.
You weren't alone when she did all this for you.
Oh, no, I invited her. I packed the house. I packed the house. I mean, I was not going to let her. I would have been too embarrassed to just have her do her club act for me. So I packed the house with
intimidating people.
Yeah, Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, and a lot of people came down to see her. She was very frightened of all of us. And after her show, everybody, not just myself, but we all went over, people, complete strangers, and put our arms around Whoopi. And she felt good in my arms, so I gave her the part. What can I tell you? Most movies that I've made, when I say, okay, you've got 4 days off, people like say, thank God, and they get in a car and they go to the big city and they do their shopping, they live their real lives, their families come in, they enjoy themselves. On this movie, the minute somebody was released for 4 or 5 days, they wouldn't leave the set. They would stand or sit in the background watching the performers who were working that day perform. And that's unheard of in a movie for me, in my experience. And the minute somebody did good work, it wasn't just me that would walk over and put my arms around someone. The whole cast would run onto the set like someone had just made a touchdown and had just finished spiking the ball, and they'd pick the person up and they'd hug and kiss. I mean, it was the relationship and the ambience created by this repertoire ensemble cast on the movie, making the movie behind the scenes, kept increasing the love quotient. So I think I did a better job on the movie based on how they were responding to the experience of making the movie.
Since De Niro can pick and choose his movies, Gene Shalit asked him why he chose Guilty by Suspicion.
When I was a kid, I had been around, had a sense of what it was about. And as I got older, the subject always interested me because I know some people who were involved in it, and I've always felt very, very badly about the whole situation for both people who gave names and who didn't give names and whose careers were ruined. And it must have been a very, very tough situation for everybody, you know. This phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it, could so easily happen again in another form. And you say, well, it won't happen again, but it always happens in a way that's new. So it's in another package, so it becomes very possible, probable, And as an actor, I could see, I mean, I wouldn't know myself actually being in that situation what I would do. I don't know. You could say you do this, you could say you do that, but when it comes down to it, you really don't know.
The climactic scene of Guilty by Suspicion takes place in the hearing room in Congress when you stand up for your rights. Whether or not you were a member or not a member, you say, is not the point. The point is that under the American system, you don't have to tell these congressmen anything because you have a right not to speak up. You're very impassioned in that hearing. Would Robert De Niro be that impassioned?
Well, I'd like to think of myself being impassioned in the right way, but I wouldn't be so bold as to say I would be. I don't know. You know, it's one thing to do it in a movie, it's another to do it in life.
I hope that Guilty by Suspicion has a very big success because not only is it a very good movie to watch, but it tells something about our recent history that a lot of people in America either never knew in the first place or have forgotten.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that alone makes it worthwhile. Of course, as a little extra, you get Robert De Niro. Looking very good in that picture, by the way. You combed your hair differently in that picture.
Only my hairdresser knows for sure.
Thank you very much for being with us. Send them over to me. I could use them, by the way.
Her performance in the Broadway production of Gigi ignited a spectacular film career now spanning over 40 years. Audrey Hepburn defined a style uniquely her own, influencing women around the world. American critics described her as magical, fawn-like, not of this world. However, she has chosen to be of this world by her commitment to its children as UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador. But it's her achievement in film that will be recognized tonight by the Film Society of Lincoln Center in New York. I spoke with Audrey Hepburn and asked her how it all began. You were a dancer in England. You had some small film roles. And you were on the set of Monte Carlo Baby when a very, very famous writer discovered you. What happened?
Right. Well, I was on the set of Monte Carlo Baby, which was being shot in France, in Monte Carlo, in fact. And the scene was being shot at the Hotel de Paris, where Colette, the great French writer, used to winter. She was very much an invalid already then. And she was there with her husband, and they stood and watched a bit of shooting in the lobby and asked to meet me. And the rest is history.
Voila.
She did say to me, you know, would you like to do a play? And I said, yes, I'd like to do a play, but I can't. I'm sorry. She said, why not? I said, because I never have. I've never spoken on the stage, and I wouldn't know how.
How old were you at this point?
I was then 22, 23, I'm not quite sure. It's so long ago. And, but she said, but you're a dancer, so you know how to work hard, so, you know, it'll be okay. And that was August of that year. And in that very same month, somebody called William Wyler came to London.
And he cast you in your first leading role.
Yes, he had 500 girls tested, or 200 or 300, whatever, a great many.
And what did he see in you?
There again, I don't know. But it was just my great good luck that they did pick my test.
Tom Hanks is one of the most beloved actors of his generation. He won back-to-back Oscars for his roles in Philadelphia and Forrest Gump. And now, with more clout than just about any actor, Tom is back in front of the cameras as another American hero in Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. Before filming Wrapped, I visited Tom on the London set, where I asked him if it's true that he could have his pick of any role out there.
Well, I think maybe any role that's out there. No, okay, first of all, that's not really true.
All of a sudden you thought that didn't sound very modest.
That sounds hideous, doesn't it? I could probably generate interest in something, but obviously the studios would like to do business with a guy like me at this point because I'm doing okay. But that's still a myth as far as honestly being able to do any damn thing you please, because the studios are not totally stupid.
But if they've got a role for a leading man, there isn't a producer or director out there or a movie studio exec who wouldn't like to have you in that role.
No, in all honesty, there is a huge swath of people that would probably leap at the chance. But there are plenty of people out there that will say, well, now, wait a minute, just because he's that guy, doesn't mean I necessarily want him.
If it's true, then, that you do have a pretty good choice of the roles, why this one?
Because the story, I mean, it all comes down to the story, and it's based in part on a true story.
You play Captain John Miller?
Captain John Miller.
A guy who is the good guy for all intent and purposes. Is he somebody you are almost being forced to play these days?
I think that my place in the audience's eye, I think I usually represent them somehow. You know, I'm not muscle bound, and I'm not, you know, faster than the human being. I can't be, you know, riddled with bullets and still foil the terrorists. I think I'm pretty much like the average Joe.
If I come to you and if, let's say, I mattered in the movie world and I had a group,
Matt,
and I said, by the way, Steven Spielberg wants to direct it, the lead character is for you. He is a drug-abusing, wife-abusing, fur-wearing bigot.
Yeah.
Could you take the risk and play that kind of guy now?
Sure, yeah, provided I understand the logic of who that guy is. I'm not interested in these kind of stories in which you have a protagonist that is completely wonderful and great and a bad guy that is completely vile and disgusting.
President Clinton was interviewed, and he said if he could choose an actor to portray him in his life story, it would be you.
You know, that's quite an honor to have anybody of a world figure, and I admire the president. I voted for the president.
You know, after the bosom buddy thing, he could have said he thought maybe you should portray Hillary, but...
Bosom buddies.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be able to...
You get through the whole interview. When you go to the bank today with the checks for the movie, what goes through your mind?
It's ridiculous. I mean, I feel like Mr. Mulray in Chinatown, you know? When Jack Nicholson comes and says, how much better can you eat, Mr. Mulray? It's ridiculously huge numbers, but that's what the thing is. Can't get a better job than this. That's why everybody would like to do it. And that's why, you know, I must say that every day I do somehow thank my lucky stars that I have the chance to be here.
Well, you know, I was always taught to enjoy everybody. You don't ridicule nobody. But you don't have to try to do what this other fella's doing. You know within yourself, he's trying to prove something. The youngsters coming up and coming through the churches and the different things. And that'll never leave my mind, the soul and everything. But if he's doing all right, you know, nothing wrong with it. He must be doing something. He's a millionaire after his first recording. So what's wrong with it?
Do you think that these things that make a million on their first recording are really lasting things, like some of the music maybe that you knew years ago?
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of that music I like some of the Beatles, they had some beautiful things. Let it be, let it be. I love that record of the Beatles. And putting in all these early ones.
There seems to be a trend these days that there are a lot of new tunes that are going back to a spiritual attitude and message. And of course, that's what a lot of jazz came from down there in New Orleans.
Well, it's all started, you know. Yeah. It all started right down there in New Orleans and on the river boats up the river to Memphis. And you can't get away from it.
I think the key word is singer. I'm a singer. I mean, I am not a jazz singer, or I'm not a blues singer. I'm not a country and western singer, or I am a singer that sings the blues. I'm a singer that sings love songs. In other words, I think of myself as a real good utility man, you know, who can play first, second, and shortstop, and catch and pitch a little bit every night. You know, one of those kind of people, you know.
Earlier in your career, you said when you were young, music was the only thing that could stop you in your tracks as a kid. What was that experience like for you when you heard music?
It had drawing powers. In other words, when I would hear the music, I don't know what it was about it, because I guess I was too young to know what it was, but whatever it was, I couldn't stay away from it. I was raised in Baptist church. You know, we went to all the revival meetings during the week when they had them, and every Sunday you went and you stayed all day. And so I had a lot of training and listening to gospel music. So if some of that comes out in me, so be it. What can I do?
What's that feeling that you look for when that goes, hits the spot, when you interpret somebody else's work?
Well, I always like to be able to do something that I feel makes me feel good when I sing a song. And although I may like a lot of songs, but that don't mean that I can sing them. myself, for me, you see. You know, like I love Nat Cole's Nature Boy. But I figure after he sung it, that was the end of it. You understand? Yeah, I mean, you see what I mean? Bon. So it's that kind of a thing with me.
What do you need to satisfy you?
I don't need anything to satisfy me except good health. I don't have any mountains to climb or any rivers to cross to satisfy me anymore. I've had some wonderful things happen to me. I've talked to 3 presidents of the most powerful country in the world. Gee whiz, I play my music, you know, and the people, they seem to be so happy, and I've been around for just about 40 years, doing exactly what I love doing.
Earlier this week, Jane spoke with author Albert Goldman about his controversial new biography of John Lennon. In an exclusive interview at a luncheon in London yesterday, Paul McCartney exclusively told music correspondent Rona Elliott that even though Goldman claims that his book is based on published reports, the author doesn't have his facts quite right.
I think that all I really think about that book is that there are probably a lot of things, as you say, that are from other books that are on the record that John did say and John did do. He certainly had some wild periods that he admitted to. But a lot of people have that. I think where he starts to exaggerate and says that John was possibly homosexual, I think he throws that in with some of the truth, and it starts to have the same credence as the real truth. And I think that's the problem with the book. There certainly are things that I've only dipped into it, actually, Albert. But revelations, well, you know. There's a bit about me where John's supposed to come round to my house and put his foot through a picture or something. Well, I mean, it never happened, you know. So if one of them never happened, it's quite possible that a lot of the stuff in the book never happened. And I say, if he's homosexual, I would have thought he'd make a pass at me in 20 years, darling.
Do you think more people are likely to believe this book because John Lennon isn't here to defend himself?
Well, that's the other thing about it, obviously, is that, you know, he's not here to defend himself, and I think that's a big problem with a book like that. It's too cheap a shot, I think. It's only my opinion.
As a friend of his, do you feel a need to go public to refute these accusations?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, John was really a great guy and really a nice fella. But fame is a crazy thing, and when you get the kind of fame that the Beatles got, if you're not that stable, it's tough. Now, if you look at John for his stability, you've got to look at a guy whose mother left him, his father left home when he was 3, who was brought up by his auntie and his uncle. His auntie was lovely, but the uncle died. And then his mother, who used to live nearby, was visiting one night. She left, she got run over by a drunken policeman and got killed stone dead when he was 16. His first marriage failed. So, you know, and on top of all of that, it's remarkable that he was as straight as he was, really.
Does a book like this make you think there's too high a price for being a celebrity?
Who cares, you know, who listens? I mean, I don't read that stuff. Like I say, it's the kind of stuff you just dabble. The first time I ever came to America, I saw the National Enquirer at Mighty Organ. And in its center pages, you know, we're just British kids, and looking at this, we'd never seen this. Now we do it better than you. But, you know, but I looked in the center pages, and there's a horse in quarters. A horse just had been cut in 4. And this was a picture for the newspapers, you know. And for me, I just think it's trash, you know. What are you going to do about it? I'm not going to. I can't fix it.
If a book like this were about to come out on you, what would you do?
About me? I'd probably read that one.
What is it about you people find so fascinating?
I don't know. I think you should ask them.
They just wanted to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen all the time?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't want to meet me. I don't know.
Doesn't strike you as bizarre or unusual?
Well, I'm a celebrity, and I think a lot of people want to meet celebrities. Isn't that how it works?
I guess so, part of the time. I also heard that you recently went home for the holidays, first time in a long time. Well, how was it?
Well, first time in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. I'd sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag.
You didn't sleep on a floor in a sleeping bag.
Okay, I didn't sleep on the floor. I had to sleep on the floor in an air mattress, okay? That's just bad.
Serious?
Yeah.
Is it hard when the whole family gets together and, I mean, everybody in the family is family except for...
Well, you know, when I go home, I don't get any sort of special treatment. And in a way, it's a relief.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, do they still, I mean, just as they ever did, push you, hit you, yell at you, fight with you, scream at you, argue?
Nobody pushes me around anymore.
Why am I not surprised?
I think my brothers know better. I mean, my older brothers used to torture me, but I think all older brothers do that.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody tries to brush it off. How much of it sticks?
Depends on what kind of a mood I'm in. Some days, you know, some weeks, months go by and things that people say about me don't affect me at all, and then I could be in a really sensitive mood and read something and feel wounded about it, but life goes on and I get past it.
Are there any mechanisms you use to get past it? I mean, some people binge themselves on eating, others go out and grab a bottle, some people run it off, some people write letters. Some people cry.
I don't know if a bad review ever made me cry. I get a lot of aggression out when I work out. I also have a lot of good friends who are very supportive of me, and if I say, like, oh God, I can't believe somebody said that about me, I have people going, what are you complaining about? There's so many people that love you, you have a great life, whatever. I mean, you know what I mean? It's...
Yeah.
So that helps.
You never had the urge, I mean, I know, like, for example, Roseanne Barr, we were talking earlier about Roseanne, she likes to pick up a pen and a pencil and...
Write notes?
Yeah, scribble nasty things off to people. Never?
It's not worth it. No.
A couple of wrap-up questions. You're a very young lady. What do you see yourself doing, let's say, 15 years from now?
I have no idea.
Oh, come on. Everybody has some idea. Maybe being retired, being a...
Retired?
Yeah.
No way.
So what's it like these days? I mean, can you explain to people a little bit what these last couple of months and maybe year have been like for you with being on the front of every newspaper and the cover of every magazine?
It's been okay, you know what I mean? It's kind of reached a fever pitch right now, so it was like more of an adjustment period, because I feel like I got over that period a long time ago when Selena came out and first kind of being thrust into the public eye. That's when it shocks you the most. You're like, oh my God, what happened to me? What happened? And this has been a challenging year in that way, but I feel really good. I feel really good about the album and the movie and everything else, and so I just feel really blessed. I don't really concentrate on the negative stuff.
Let me ask you a little bit about Ben.
Okay.
Okay, just a little bit?
Ben.
A little bit, Ben. Okay.
Okay.
You wrote some really lovely things about him in this new
Yes.
CD, okay? In one song called Dear Ben, I love you, you're perfect, a manifestation of my dreams. I write this song to let you know that you'll always be my lust, my love.
All right
Changing
now,
pages
Matt, you don't have to
quickly.
read it all out
My
loud.
man,
though.
my child, my friend, and my king.
You're embarrassing me.
No, I mean, that's quite something. How has this relationship changed you?
It's changed me. It's like when you really feel like you have a partner, you know what I mean? Somebody standing by your side who supports you, who understands what you're going through, and is your best friend. And that has a value, especially when you're in this business, that is priceless. And it's just, he's been very inspirational to me in my music.
So last weekend, the reports are you guys are in Las Vegas, right?
Right.
Did he really buy your mom a Mercedes?
Okay, first of all, there was no $500,000 shopping spree. I wish we would have won that much money, but we didn't. But
Because I'd marry him for a Mercedes.
We did win a little bit of money, and yes, we did go and buy my mom a car.
And apparently, you know, they drove the place crazy. They had to close down some stores. They had to shut the front doors while you guys were in there. That has to be a little bit difficult to get used to.
It was a little weird. It was a little weird because, like, people were at the... It's all glass doors in Vegas, you know what I mean? The shops and stuff, and they were banging on the doors, and I was like, oh my God, but you know, it was fine.
And I guess if you have to really understand how supportive he is in your career right now, he got up at like 5:30 in the morning to be here. There he is right there, hiding behind people. Ben, you got up at 5:30 in the morning to be here? Yeah, yeah, he did.
Yesterday,
And even this morning, we've been deluged with telegrams, with phone calls, with registered letters, with reporters asking, when are you going to say something about Charles Van Doren? Up until now, I have said nothing, not presuming to judge my fellow man until he was judged by my betters, including Charles Van Doren, who has judged himself now. As you know, Charles's contract has been terminated by the National Broadcasting Company. And I wonder what you want me to say. What I want to say is that I knew Charles quite well, I think. You get to know a person when you're with him at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week. There's a certain openness about 5 o'clock in the morning. You get to know each other on plane flights 10, 15 hours at a time sometimes. You get to know each other when you're fellow Americans abroad, as we were in Paris, where we ate in little restaurants together. You get to know people in the heat and humidity of Titusville, Pennsylvania, where we went recently together. I came to love Charles, to love his inquiring mind, his enthusiasm, his lifeness. And I wonder what you want me to say. He wronged himself, of course. He erred. I think you agree on that. Here on the Today Show, Charles said, and I quote him now, I believe in the honesty of the contestants on that program, 21, whom I know. Some of those contestants I have known only via the television screen. Some I have met personally. I also believe in the honesty of the questions used on that program. I myself was never given any answers or told any questions beforehand. And as far as I know, none of the contestants received any coaching of this sort. What do you want me to say? The NBC statement issued yesterday says, this statement is typical of the repeated assurance through which Mr. Van Doren masked his participation in the rigging. On this record, we feel we cannot continue to present Mr. Van Doren over our facilities as a representative of NBC. While we recognize and appreciate Mr. Van Doren's many fine contributions to television's appearance on the Today program and various educational shows, we do not feel we can have two sets of standards. Those who have knowingly engaged in the fraud of quiz show rigging must be removed from the broadcasting scene. With deep regret, we have concluded that no exception should be made with Mr. Van Doren. That's the NBC statement. He was one of our family. We are a little family on this show, strange as it may seem. Whatever Charles did wrong was, of course, wrong. I cannot condone it or defend it, and I have no intention of doing so. But we will never forget the non-Euclidean geometry essays or the poetry of Sir John Suckling, which Charles brought to us. I can remember having breakfast with Charles and with Mark, his father, the day that he got his doctorate. I'm sorry to break up this way. I know how much he loved to teach. I know his family. I know his charming wife. I've watched his little girl grow up at his home and through the pictures that Charles always carried with him. What do you want me to say? I can only say I'm heartsick.
Who did shoot JR? We may never get the answer to that question. I mean, the people who produced that program are going to keep us in suspense for as long as they possibly can. JR himself is here, doesn't look bloody or wounded or anything. Right out of the hospital, here's Larry Hagman. I can't think of anybody having a better time in that whole role than you are.
No kidding.
How long do you think you can keep this scam up?
20, 30 years, something like that.
Just as long as you possibly can, right?
Sure.
Look, among other things, you came in with a new cowboy hat today. I suspect that wherever you go these days, somebody figures they've got to give you a cowboy hat.
Oh, yeah. Charlie Daniels gave me this. Isn't that a beauty, huh?
Yeah.
And somebody gave me a friend of mine down in Dallas gave me the hat band. It's gold-plated barbed wire, which I think is pretty good for the character, you know.
Yeah. What are they going to do? Lock up the room and videotape the scene and then send it out all
I
at once?
honestly don't know. If I knew, I've been offered really an awful lot of money to divulge who did it. I don't know who did it. I have my suspicions, of course, but all the scripts that we've been given are minus 15 or 20 pages at the end for those particular scripts, 2 or 3. So it's, I really don't know. I can't wait to find out.
I'm going to disclose at this time that Larry Hagman and I were once neighbors.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I loved about him best then, he didn't bring over a little Tupperware covered dish, by the way, to welcome us to the neighborhood, but you had a life out there on the beach that you were very fond of. You got to play Frisbee all day long. You sat in your jacuzzi. The winter that we were there, you had a goose in the jacuzzi. Is that right?
Right.
Don't you miss that?
I still got it. What do you mean? I just flew in about an hour ago from there.
Yeah, but the moving around the world and everything, isn't it going to be a little...
No, it's wonderful. My wife and I were sitting at home. We'd been home 3 days, and she says, "Where are we going next?" And I said, "I don't know." And then I got a call to come and be on the show. So
is it possible for you to go out in the streets these days without people just pestering you to
No,
death?
it's real hard. It really is. Because everybody says, JR, you know, JR this, JR that. It's, you know, it's part of it. I like it. I like it. I know it'll only last another 30 or 40 seconds, so I'm living with it, you know.
And you've been a happily married man for a long time. But
25 years.
But the ladies must come after you a little bit differently
Isn't
these
that
days.
wonderful? Why now? Why not when I was 19? You know.
J.R. Ewing, in the person of Larry Hagman. You still do your no talk on Sundays?
Yes,
A
I
day
do.
of absolute silence?
That's right. That's right. Well, I talk a lot the other 6 days, that's for sure. I had a birthday recently, and I didn't talk on my birthday. It was Sunday.
And how old were you?
49.
I'm looking forward to the big O birthday next year.
Well, it's all the same, you know. After 22, it's all downhill.
I'll tell you, it couldn't have happened to a nicer folk than Larry Hagman.
That's right.
Real glad to have you here, even though you're on another network. That one with the
Are we? What network is it?
Bloodshot Eye.
Oh, yeah?
In no particular order in the past, your show has dealt with, I wrote it down, but homosexuality, teenage pregnancy, unwed mothers, masturbation, drinking, drugs, cohabitation. Those are just some of the issues that you all have confronted on Roseanne. What kind of issues do you think you all will deal with going into your 7th season?
Well, I never thought of them as dealing with issues.
Yeah.
I always just thought of them as like everyday life, because I think that most families do deal with those things.
Let's talk about Roseanne, the woman.
Okay, the woman. Her needs.
Is it all systems go on this divorce?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I heard, I watched TV, they go, this divorce has been postponed. I'm like, get on the phone and tell them. Oh, no, it's definitely going straight ahead, no postponement.
But no love lost between the two of you. Is it cordial at all, or?
No, it's not cordial.
At all?
Never will be. No, never.
You'll never be friends?
No, never will speak ever again.
Well, you used to say some pretty mean things about your first husband, right?
That's true.
And now you all are friends.
Yeah, we are.
I feel like a marriage counselor here.
Yeah. Me and my husband, we have 3, the first husband. We have 3 kids, though.
Is that what prompted your friendship, you think? So you'll never be friendly with Tom?
No, never will speak to him again.
What do you think about these made-for-TV movies about your life? You're not too keen on
They are
this.
so bad. You know, of course, I had to go over there and steal the scripts and send spies over there to get them, because they wouldn't give them to me. Because I said, you know, let me see if they're correct before I sue you. And so they told me, well, you don't own the rights to your own life story. So I thought, well, that's weird. So I'm going to produce, you know, a show about Warren Littlefield's life for ABC this season. It'll only be 2 minutes long. It'll be really boring. And also the...
Hey, I work for NBC.
I know,
Careful.
but I called Warren and I go, why are you doing this?
What did he say?
Well, Roseanne, you know, we mean nothing personal by it, but, you know, these things have been out there. And I go, no, half of these things are from my book. You don't just take my book without paying, you know, now my publishers are going to sue you, too.
Are you going to sue
Well,
NBC
yeah.
and Fox?
Of course I'm going to sue them both. I mean, some of the stuff's true, but most of it isn't. And, I mean, they weren't there.
One of the movies ends with something saying that you got the tattoo.
The tattoo, yeah, like it ends, black screen. On August 4th, Roseanne had her tattoos removed. Who's going to watch a movie that ends with a black screen and talking about butt tattoos? Really?